Closed doors, I'm a fool for you.
Okay, so again, good day everyone. So for today, we will be discussing some basic coding in Python. Okay, so again, topics that we will be discussing is simply how to print or output an input, use input output codes in Python. And then we'll also be discussing some strings and how to use formatted strings. Okay, so let's get started. So as you can see, I am currently using my Python IDE. I'll be using the PyCharm IDE Community Edition. Okay, so PyCharm Community Edition is actually a freeware, so no need to pay any. As you can see, one of the best feature of Python is that it is very easy to use. Now, why do we say easy to use? Again, most of the codes that we are using in Python is really close with what we are using in the English language, kumbaga. Okay? For example, if we want to type something or output something in English, we use the keyword print or the word print, which in the dictionary which is defined in the dictionary to output something. Okay, so clearly in Python it also does the same. So if I'm going to write, as you can see, if I'm going to type print, it already gives the function. Okay, as you can see, there's an F on the side of the print showing that it is a function. Now, if I'm going to hit tab, it's going to auto-complete the function. So now, if I'm going to write uh, hello world on our print, as you can see, since hello world is a string, it should be inside the double quote, which will indicate or tell Python that what we wanted to print is a string. Okay, so now if we're going to print it, as you can see, it outputs hello world. Now, one of the difference between Python and other languages is that, as you can see, at the end of every syntax or sentences or code sentences, we don't have to place the semicolon. Okay, so actually, this is quite a relief for us programmers because again, when we tend to write long codes, we there are some instances that we really forget to write the semicolons, and usually this is one of the reasons that gave us a lot of problem, kumbaga. 'Di ba? Try to imagine writing 3,000 codes, tapos 3,000 lines of codes, and then merong isang line na nag-error, tapos yung kulang mo lang pala is semicolon. 'Di ba nakaka-frustrate? So this is actually a really huge relief, 'di ba, when you are coding. Okay? So as you can see, we use print to output. Now, how about if we want to input something? So now, if I'm going to add a new line, now if we want to input something, we just use the keyword input. Okay, so as you can see, the input function. Now, using this string, uh, this will allow Java to prompt or tell the user instructions on what he's going to do next. So usually what we do here is we tell the user that Java or rather Python rather is now waiting for the user to input something. So let's say just please enter your name. So we have it now. Now, again, since we are going to get an input, so we have to use a variable that would fetch that input. So we can have here, let's say just name equals input. Now, another good thing with Python is that it is actually intelligent enough to tell what type of data or what data type the variable is using. It's actually similar with PHP if you have used PHP. What happens is every time that Python or the variable in Python receives a data, it can identify what type of data type that data is, and it will adjust to that one. Okay, so for example here, since we're going to input something, it will now tell our variable name that what we are passing is a string variable. So now we can say here hello, and then we'll just have to use the concatenate symbol. Now take note, if you are going to pass a string with a different you're going to uh, what do you call this one, put together a variable and a string, you have to use concatenate. Okay, because if we're not going to use concatenate, uh, Python does not allow that kind of procedure. The same, just the same with other programming languages. Okay, we have to always use the concatenate symbol, which is the plus symbol. Okay, so we'll right here, since we have our concatenate symbol, we just write name. As you can see, if we're going to type the word name, it already Python, or the rather PyCharm already gives us the variable with the v sign, telling us that that is actually a variable. Okay, so now if we are going to print this one, let's say we are now going to have, let's say, Wesley. It will now output hello world Wesley. So that is actually how you input something and print it using Python. Now that is very basic. Now, what about if we want to perform some arithmetic calculations from our input? For example, what if I'm going to ask for the age of a person, and then we'll try to compute for how old that person is. Okay, so for example, let's say please enter your mm, birth year, and then instead of name, we'll name this one uh, birth year. Okay, so now we'll have to write here, let's say age equals we have 2022, since we are in the year 2022, minus our birth year. Okay, now as you can see, if I'm going to run this one, let's say uh, year 2000. Okay, it's going to give us an error. Now, why does it go? Why do we get an error from this one? Simply because, take note. Okay, problem is we use an age here. We use the keyword age, which is name, which should be age. Okay, but still, if you're going to run that one, it's a year 2000. It's going to still give us an error. The problem here is that when we subtracted 2022 with our birth year, take note that our birth year is in the string data type. Okay, since we got it from an input, the default value of our of this data is a string. Now we cannot, as you can see, if going to point it there, it's going to give you a string. Okay, this is birth year is a string. So we cannot subtract or perform an arithmetic operation on a string. So this is now a problem for us. Now, how do we do this? Okay, now we have to parse this string into an integer so we can perform arithmetic operations. So to do that, we just add int and then open and oops, close. Now, using the int function, it will now parse. When we say parse, convert, okay, it's going to convert that data type or that data into an int data type. Okay, so now if we're going to run this one, let's say I was born in year 2000, enter, and so you get 22. So that is how we perform how we perform arithmetic operation or some basic arithmetic operations with our variables. Okay, so next thing now we're going to do is let's try to do some strings. Okay. Okay, so let me again remove this one, and then let's try to let's say create a variable. So let's just say let's say message equals, and then we should be a string. So let's say uh, information technology. Okay, so now what's good, or another feature of Python, is that with it is a lot easier to use functions in strings, like compared to other what they call this one, programming languages. Okay, so for example, let me give you something. So if I'm going to print, let's say uh, message, and then have, okay, if I'm going to print message, I'm going to get information technology. Now, instead of message, let's change this one to a more suitable name. Let's say course. Okay, so I'll change this to course, and then I'll use index. Okay, so take note, back then during your programming or in C++, when we use uh, this open and close bracket, it tells us, it indicates arrays. Okay, but in as Python, it actually tells us that it is going to use, or we can use this to manipulate our strings. So for example, if I'm going to write 0, okay, so take note, on our course, 0 is what? It is actually the letter I, because in arrays always start with the value or array address of 0. Okay, so we have 0 for I, 1 for n, and so on. So if I'm going to print this one, it's going to give us the letter I. Okay, so same, if I'm going to change this to, let's say, 3, it's going to give me the value of O. Okay, so yan. Okay, so that is one of the features. But now, what's good with this one is, what if I'm going to type -0? Okay, now in our previews, or back then, if you're going to write a -0 in an index, it's going to give you a value, or an error, because the last value in an index is always 0. But in Python, it's the different way. If we're going to place a negative, let's say -1, oops, wrong, -1, try to guess what will happen. If I'm going to run this one, it's going to give me y. Okay, so -1, now instead of giving a 0, it will now get the last value of the string. Okay, so in our string, we have information technology. Y is the last ones. That's why it is now the negative. It has now the value of -1. Also, if you're going to change this one to, let's say, -3, it's going to give you the value O from the third one. Okay, that's not all. What about we decided to just have, let's say, I want to get the first 3 characters of the string. So with that, we can just have place the index 0 and then 3. Now, take note, it's now with this one, with this code, it's going to get the value of the first string, and then until the third index, but it will not output what is on the index 3. Okay, so it's going to get the 0 from 2. The 3 will be the limiter. Okay, so if I'm going to run this, we'll get the value INF. Okay, so that is how we use it. Okay, now how about if we're going to just have it like this? Okay, so we'll just have 0. Okay, can anyone try to guess what will happen? Okay, if we're going to run this one, it will give us the whole string. So there is no limiter. That is why the whole string was given. Now, what if we're going to have 5 here and then remove or remove the fir or the 0? So what will happen is since it is blank, Python will immediately tell that this value or the default value for this one for a blank is actually 0. That's why if we're going to run this one, it will give us in 4. But if I'm going to write here, let's say uh, 5, and then this is, let's say, 10, you'll get, as you could say, Mateo. Okay, so that is how we use uh, strings in what they call this one, Python. Okay, so now for the last topic. Now, how about if we want to create a long strings? Okay, for example, let's say we'll have let's say first equals, let's say, West, and last equals Tim. No error. That inside. Okay, now let's try to create a message. Message equals, let's say, uh, first. Now, we'll be referring first from our first variable. And then we're going to parse it. And then let's say we'll be including some special strings here just to spice things up. Let's say, let's add um, braces. Then, okay. And then again, concatenate. And then let's use the last variable, and then concatenate again, and then place one, and then let's say else. Uh, Actually, we don't need this one. Is teacher, and then place. Okay, so I think we are all good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to print this one. Try to print. Okay. First, let me check muna, no? Then parse, parse. Okay. Okay. So, parang may error tayo. So, if you're going to run this one, okay. So, as you can see, Wes team is a teacher. Okay. So, we forgot to place some space here para may hindi nakadikit. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is an example. But then, as you can see, medyo nakakahilo siya. Okay. It's really hard to code something like this, especially if someone who is not that proficient in using Python will see our code and then ganito yung mga nakalagay. So medyo nakakahilo tignan. Diba? So that's why let's try now to use formatted string. So let's say message one. I'll do the same thing, but this time around I'll be using a formatted string. So now I'll just have F, okay, and then have this one first, and then okay, case, and then followed by the, let's say, last, and then and is a teacher. Okay, so now if I'm going to run this one, as you can see, Oops, I need to also print this one. Message one. Okay, so I'm going to run this one. As you can see, they have the same output, but then the one where we use a formatted string is a lot cleaner to look at. Now, what happens here? Okay, now formatted string allows us to include variables inside our strings. Now, how do we use formatted strings? We first have to tell Python that it is a formatted string. We now use the letter F. As you can see here, before the string, I place the letter F. It will now indicate that this is now a formatted string. Now, after having this one, after the after telling it that it is a formatted string, whenever we want to include a variable inside our string, we just have to use the open and close curly braces, and then inside those braces, we place our variable. Okay, and then that's the trick. Okay, so as you can see, I only have one what do you call this one quote. I only use one string quotes, unlike on the first one it is really tricky or medyo nakakahilo, hindi ko maintindihan kung para kahit ako mismo nahirapan kung nasaan yung last quote and second. Okay, so this is how we use formatted strings. Okay, so that would be all for today's topic, and I'll see